humanity. My name is Am Rosen. Welcome to the podcast library, Psychological Keys to Human Fulfillment. You've entered the section of this library titled The Nature of Consciousness, State of Mind. This is podcast 3, Conceptual, Symbolic, Intellectual-Based Consciousness. In and of themselves, feelings are pure and simple. They are simply a direct response to what you've experienced. As common need becomes habituated by and to repetitive circumstance, emotional patterns are formed on the feeling level of consciousness. Emotions are pseudo-feelings. Emotions are the motion emitted, the motion you are actively making in response to your sense impressions. As in every instance, nature gives birth to its own potential. That natural potential becomes its spiritual potency. That potency eventually takes over, redirects, restructures the functional quality of its original range of interaction. Then, once this newer range of interaction has become integrated, it in turn gives birth to its next newer potential, as the process spirals on. When the physical and feeling levels of consciousness have integrated to where they continuously redefine each other, your reaction to experience can shape you into patterns of emotional response, even when those patterns are inappropriate to your most inclusive potential. For example, maybe you're involved in a sudden combative struggle, life and death struggle. Your muscles tense, jaw locks, you assume a certain attitude, a posture, growls come out of you. Without realizing it, this reflex is allowing you to focus and bring into action more of your strength. Thereby, the body-feeling reactive complex has begun re-augmenting and locking itself into character traits of exaggerated fixation, even while excluding other ranges of motion that are available to its overall potential. Oriented from the feeling level of consciousness, this straying from pure responsiveness is the rudimentary subconscious beginning of the primitive emergence of individuality, by which you've emotively begun to identify with varying degrees of performance capabilities. Continuing our evolutionary trek up through the spiraling complexities of the developing human nervous system, the activating cortex of the brain is becoming more capable of retaining and cross-referencing your sense impressions. You have your senses, how you're capable of perceiving on the physical level. You have your feeling responses, how you're capable of being impressed by what you're sensing. When the nervous system has evolved to where it can start to retain and cross-reference your sense impressions by associating them with symbols, then you've begun to enter the third level of consciousness, which is conceptual, symbolic, intellectual-based consciousness. To illustrate, let's say that you are experiencing a physical sensation of hunger, and you've learned when you get this sensation, if you want to feel good, you've got to eat something. Now, you find that when you eat the food off of this first platter, it's so delicious. When you eat the food from the second platter, it's so-so. When you eat the food off of this third platter, it's disgusting. These guttural exclamations represent what you felt, which in turn refers you back to what you physically sensed that cued you in to these responses. reflexively, symbols are starting to become a part of your emotional vocabulary. Symbolism is the intellect-based representation of experience. Every thought that runs through your mind, no matter what form it may take, is an associative symbol conceived to represent an aspect of your experience. For example, let's say that you want to think about the sun. Now, you may use the phonetically sounding word in your mind called sun, or whatever language you speak it in. You may spell it out in your alphabet, S-U-N. You may think of pictures you've seen of the sun, drawings you've made. You may think of great works of art, photographs, movies, times when you've watched a sunset, times when you've watched a sunrise, and all kinds of other times in between. But this collection of thought symbols in your mind are neither the actual sun nor your relationship to the apparent forms and functions of the sun. Rather, these mentally codified notations, conceived as intellectual symbols, they are then thought molded into concepts which are coming to represent some aspect of your experience. The function of the intellect is to leverage your awareness into a relation of form and function through symbols. These associative symbols, from the most guttural growls to the most wispy inferential abstractions, form the basis of language. Language is the singular, most important invention which started our species on the path to fulfilling its inherent mental potential. Without language, there's no art, no culture, no politics. Without language, there's no organizing principle. Without language, there's no way of aspecting within ourselves, socially sharing with each other, or passing our awareness on to our posterity. Without language, there is only random associations dominated by the dictates of our species' survival needs. Language is based upon the intellect's ability to retain and cross-reference sense impressions in the form of symbols. In turn, this allows the intellect to pull back from the continuum of experience and orient itself towards what it is coming to think it does or doesn't want. This becomes the basis of self-volition. This becomes the means and medium through which awareness exercises seeming control over its supposed situation. This is the formation of will. Will, the intention to fulfill the desire of what you have come to feel that you want. That is, what the pattern conditioning of your feelings have oriented you to approach or avoid. The degree to which this newly emerging focus of intellectually facilitated awareness can come to seemingly take control over circumstance becomes characterized as its willpower. No matter how rudimentary it may still be, no matter how much it is still obscured by subconscious generic patterning, in order to exercise this willpower, one must develop a sense of self as existing. This is accomplished through intellectually symbolizing a representation of your experience. Now you've begun to create a mental measuring rod. Value is no longer only determined by feelings of approach or avoidance. Now you've begun to crudely estimate what you think you should approach or avoid. However, at this level, the mental apparatus of the intellect still remains subservient to the whims of the feelings. Now, along with the unconscious-based patterning of the body's physicality and the beginning subconscious conditioning of the feeling responses, a new layer of processing is beginning to add to this ever-complexing pot of urges, as under the added focusing ability as provided by this more expanded use of the subconscious, commandeering the intellect's representational symbolizing, a newly emerging level of programmed responses is starting to redirect the disposition of feelings. But long before the intellect can come to slug out its intentions against the inherent limitations of its own level of processing, before it can slug it out with the feelings and sensations for supposed dominance over the nervous system, the third level of consciousness has begun attempting to define reality. If you think you exist, then you must start to deal with your existence. Decisions, decisions, decisions. So, keeping all of this in mind, let's again say that you are experiencing a physical sensation of hunger. And you know, if you want to feel good about it, you're going to have to eat something. Now, it turns out that that something you eat happens to be the most satisfying meal you have ever had. Everything about it is wonderful. The presentation is spectacular. The aroma sends you salivating all over the place. Every bite is an explosion of ecstasy through your taste buds. It goes down easy. It's digesting well. You feel light, energized, totally satisfied. You're no longer the least bit hungry. But you start thinking to yourself, yeah, that was really good. I really enjoyed that. Now, I'm going to have to eat again sooner or later. What else would give me so much satisfaction? Well, maybe next time I'll have some French cuisine, or some Chinese, or some Nouvelle Mediterranean, or maybe just a big juicy burger. Now, you're not seeing food, you're not smelling food, you're not tasting food, touching food, or hearing food. There doesn't have to be anything that's actually edible anywhere within the vicinity. You are just thought associating symbols about food. However, thoughts are powerful. If you keep thinking about those thought symbols about food, well, then you will start to bring up the feelings you had that caused you to associate those symbols in the first place. And if you do that intensely enough, then you'll cue back in the physical response patterns in your body that caused you to bother to respond that way and have those feelings. It's like, you know, when they're sauteing the shallots and they've in the butter with a little bit of garlic and in the wine and they've added these little liqueur-soaked bits of fresh cherry to the chocolate cake, and they've got that creamy icing. Now, none of that's here. You're just playing with thought symbols. But if you think about them intensely enough, well, your mouth may start to salivate. Your glands may start to secrete digestive enzymes. Your digestive organs may suddenly come online like they're supposed to be busy. And even though you're not hungry, you have no actual need for food, you may find yourself craving food. Simplistically, this has a lot to do with the emotional basis of compulsion. It's not that hard to see that many people are confusing their thoughts about food, about themselves, about life, with the actuality of the living process. In the next podcast, we'll start to examine what happens when the intellect takes dictatorial control over the operations of the nervous system. Thank you for lending your consideration. Until we meet again.